Without resistance, there is no building of strength. Nathaniel Brown. On today's episode, we're talking about mindset, resistance, stress, being comfortable in a room. We are going to dive into how to navigate the hard places. You have the power to be the boss of your own life. I'm your host, Monica Allen. I'm a wife, mom, entrepreneur, best-selling author, lifelong learner, and your biz bestie. I have a love and passion for all things small business. Growing my own company from $700 to over 7 figures annually, my goal is to bring you inspiration, business-focused topics and tips, encouragement, and a community that helps you launch, grow, and scale your business, whether you are a dreamer, a side hustler, or a seasoned entrepreneur. You are listening to the Become Your Own Boss podcast. This episode is brought to you by Zeus's Closet. Do you and your team wear clothes with your company's logo on them? Do you give your clients or customers promotional products to help them remember you and your company? At Zeus's Closet, we are like a tattoo shop for your clothes. We help many companies provide their entire team with branded apparel for themselves and promotional products to leave with clients and customers. Wearing branded apparel help colleagues feel like part of a team and make your company look more professional. Right now, you can save 15% on our Solopreneur package, which includes 3 polo shirts and 2 button-down shirts with your company logo simply by using the promo code BOSS. That's BOSS, B-O-S-S, at checkout. You can order a package for each team member so everyone has a shirt for each day of the week. See the link in the show notes to access the discount. I am so excited to bring you my first guest interview in season 4 and underneath the Become Your Own Boss name. Today, my guest is the founder and CEO of This Functional Life and Wellness. This Functional Life and Wellness is a personal development brand geared towards helping others embrace their journey and live beyond their often self-imposed limits. Starting the business after noticing an overabundance of coaches and counselors in the personal development and wellness industry that lacked the skill of listening, Nathaniel Brown decided to set an intention toward listening closely. There he found that many of the solutions that were needed to move others beyond their sticking points were right in front of them. In order for us to be the boss of our lives, we all have to move past blocks or sticking points. Sometimes on a daily, weekly, or even yearly basis. We all have to move past self-doubt. Nathaniel's gems dropped in this episode will help us do just that and live life to our fullest potential. So take out your notebooks and check out my interview with Nathaniel. So Nathaniel, I'm so excited to have you join me today. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I know it's been a long stretch of time since we've been able to really pinpoint this, but with all the connections we've made on Clubhouse, it was about time that we sit down and have a really good, authentic conversation.
Yes, for sure, for sure. I'm excited to talk about your business, This Functional Life and Wellness.
Yes.
Tell me what made you start that company.
Oh, it could be a long story, but I'm gonna then sit down into a distilled version. But I had always had an interest in physical personal training. I've always had an interest in the human body. My mother is in the medical field. She's a medical lab technician. And my dad is a mechanic. So this engineering side of things sort of sat with me. And I started to notice a trend when I walked into health facilities and gyms of the like. I started to notice this trend where people were not being taken care of unless they were paying for someone to take care of them. It almost seemed like it was okay to be injured because you didn't make the financial sacrifice to the trainer in order to get it just felt like I didn't like the agreement there. So I decided to do something about it. And I wanted to train people in a way that educated them about their body and why I was doing the training. So I got certified as a personal trainer and I started doing training in a gym so I can get the lay of the land on how things work. And I started to implement some of my ideas in that sector and saw some really significant change. I mean, like mindset wise, I've always been that personal development style of individual. But then the coaching side of things started to take play as well. It took root with me because it's all about mind body connection. And I felt this separation piece between people and their bodies, where it's like most of the body shaming that people were going through was what they were doing to themselves with the yo-yo dieting and the not appreciating their bodies the way they are. So I wanted to change the narrative about what personal training is and how it works and how people can get the best out of it, and what coaching really is all about. Not about saying something that everybody else is saying really fast and loud, because what became of coaching and what my experience of it had been was that the person that's being coached is saying the least, and that's a problem. For me, I feel like the coaches were talking too much. It's like, shut up for a second and listen. An ancient proverb is that, a man who answers a thing but without hearing it is a fool. So too many answers before they're actually questions. Therefore, like, there's a lot of erroneous talk and nothing is actually getting done because we're not getting to the root of the problem, which you just made sure that you were heard. And I didn't want to be that sort of a listener. So I studied listening and understood how, listening skills were very important. And I decided I want to be able to present this as a service to others. So I did online training, and then I do one-to-one coaching. And then I got certified in a healing modality that sort of gets deeper into the subconscious emotional portion of why people are experiencing what they're experiencing. And it helped me bring a better perspective to the table. So when I have a one-on-one, you might schedule time with me and the one-on-one may be going, you think it might be going this way, but what I'm actually after is the reason why you called in the first place. And it's usually something that takes place way deep down. So I started the company because it was like, okay, I want to bring the people back to a functional way of living, something that says, this is what it feels like to take a deep breath, and I can continue in this deep breath for a very, very long time. And I wanted to give people tools. So I educate, I address, and then we assess.
I like that. So you are taking, because normally when you think of a personal trainer, you're thinking of someone that's going to help you get into shape. You're going into a gym, you're going to be able to run a mile and that type of thing. But you're looking at the person as a whole. And we all know that all things really starts with our mindset.
Absolutely.
And so that's the root of what you're getting to.
Absolutely.
So let's talk more about the listening aspect. Mm-hmm. What are you listening for? And I'm not necessarily talking about just as, it's kind of two parts. As a business owner, what are you listening for from your clients to help your business? But also, what are you listening for to help them be better in their wellness?
I'm listening. That's a great question. I'm listening for pain. And nothing initiates responsibility like pain. The purpose of pain isn't for you to feel bad. The purpose of pain is to send you a message that says, hey, there's something here that we're being irresponsible with, and we need to change our response to this situation. So I had one client, she was 85 years old. She'd come in the gym with a little walker. And the first thing I did was I took her walker away. And most people think, oh my gosh, that's cruel. Oh, how could you treat someone like that? No, what I did was I took away her comfort zone. It's painful. But what it did was it made her responsible with how she carried herself in the gym. Once we take away the crutch, the inferiority is out the room. And now she has to address, it's out in the air, and now she has to address it. I feel inferior without this thing. Therefore, we're addressing the pain point. And she had injured her femur at one point, and we started rehabbing that and doing some things to help strengthen her quad muscles. But the idea is I'm listening for that pain response. What's that thing that you'll say, oh my gosh, I don't want this. What's the thing that you don't want that's causing the pain response that you're sweeping under the rug? You're not doing anything about it, but you're running away from. I'm looking for that thing. And that's the thing that usually is where the call to action is. Like pain evokes a call to action for responsibility. And wherever I don't care what it is, it can, and we're not talking about like pinching your finger and slamming your hand in a door. That's a type of pain. That's a type of central nervous system pain. But there are pains on the deep emotional level that feel something different. Driving down the road in traffic and someone cuts you off, and your response to that, it exposes a pain point. And the pain point usually is connected to something that you expect or you feel entitled to. So pain sort of opens the Pandora's box to all of the things that you felt like you were entitled to in your life. And when you're not getting what you want in those moments, your body, the universe, your everything else works in tandem with one another to bring about a pain response. And then it says, okay, hey, we've got to deal with this and we've got to deal with it now. Otherwise, it becomes chronic. And anything that's chronic means you've been irresponsible in that space for an extended period of time. So what we want to do is when I'm approaching someone, I want to know what that pain point is. And I'm also listening for how long you've allowed it to be there, because that determines how deep and how much work I need to do to get you back to the ground zero where the pain point is, and then start asking questions around that.
Okay. So that brings like so many things to my mind.
I saw your wheels turning. I was like, oh boy, here we go.
Okay. Well, my first question on that is, what's a pain that, of course, not calling any names, but a client you've dug up within a client that was completely unexpected?
Oh yeah.
Because to me, the walker is a little more physical, right? You see that tangible thing, but what's something that you've dug up that's maybe not so tangible?
Yeah, it was a response to not feeling enough, and the pain response to not feeling enough. You'll find this in people who have this inferiority, is that they'll look for agreement in multiplicity of places. So they'll look for agreement as the foundation for relationships that they build with people. And when the agreement is not there, they feel like the relationship is over, because we all have it. There's a relationship, and then we have the relationship. And the relationship is where we've put the most meaning. That thing that we put the definite article on, that's what I'm after. And that's the thing that shows up. So the feeling of not enough. I was talking to one lady who did a one-on-one with me about 2 weeks ago, and we got deep into some stuff. And like, she booked like a 30-minute session, but I was like, nah, 30 minutes ain't going to do it. We're going to have to we're going to just go until we get you to homeostasis. And I worked with her for about 2.5 hours, and we worked hard. And I said some very strong things to challenge her stories. So the pain points are usually connected to the stories that we tell ourselves in response to the traumas that took our breath away. So the idea and the whole process is, okay, how do I resuscitate? How do I mimic life long enough to get to the truth? Because that's what resuscitation is. When I'm walking in the room with someone, and I'm in the virtual space with someone, I'm looking to resuscitate them, but I'm mimicking life for the moment while they are incapacitated by trauma, just long enough so they'll communicate that thing. So there was one statement that one young lady made she was like 5 years old. And she said, yeah, I remember I used to go to school and I used to give my lunch money away because I saw people who needed it more. And then when I told my parents that, my parents were like, well, don't do that, because then you won't have enough for yourself. So she associated a subconscious program was associated with giving, which meant that when I give, I don't have enough for me. And she lived in a money lack program for the entirety of her life, from 5 until the day she worked with me. The day she called me and we had our session for about 45 minutes. I was able to pinpoint that for her, show her where it was, told her that the story you're telling yourself is what you're living. If you don't want the reward from the story you're telling, then change the damn story, because you're not going to get anything different. It's not going to happen differently for you. It's just not going to work that way. So stories are important, and getting to those pain points and getting to that subconscious level where the subconscious mind starts to speak freely enough, where the space is safe enough for the subconscious mind to feel free to speak in that way. Oh, you will get all kinds of stuff. So that inferiority there, I'm not enough, there's not enough, that whole enough thing, it's all sort of tied there.
You say that, and I think you're a parent, if I remember correctly. Yes. So do you ever wonder sometimes how you're screwing up your kids?
Absolutely.
I really think about that.
Yeah. Because the best I have to offer is in some ways the best I've had to offer was the best someone else had to offer, because you're a byproduct or an artifact of the stories that were told to you. And because a
Right.
child is so impressionable, when they're at that stage, when they're in theta, right, from 1 to 7, they're in theta brainwaves, they're just completely programmable. So whatever you tell them, there's no question to it. It's absolute truth. And they don't
Right.
know that there's a counterpart to life that allows you the space to ask a question and show up differently. They don't know that. So when I'm talking to my son, I am intentional about, I'd say 85% of the time, and saying, hey, you don't have to believe a word I'm saying. And it's okay that you don't believe a word. He's 7. I talk to him like he's like a 25-year-old adult. I said, it's okay. You don't believe. I never did baby talk. My wife will tell you, I never did baby talk. I always spoke to him. So he's a great communicator now, and his vocabulary is second to none. But I always tell him, hey, you don't have to believe anything I'm saying. However, research it. Do your own research. Continue to ask questions. Always ask questions. Never make statements and put a period on it and walk away. Always understand there's a continuation to the story. So whatever that statement is, you're going to have to build on it. And you'll find that where you end up might be further away from where you started, but at least you're progressing. If you've always stayed the same, then you didn't do anything. You didn't grow at all. And you've basically wasted time and life energy.
Right.
I get it. Talking to your children is it's a tricky one. It's a trick because you want them to be healthy, you want them to be whole, you want all of these things for them, but you can't do it for them. They have to do it for themselves. And the minute
I'm just afraid of saying that one thing that leads them down this rabbit hole of feeling insecure or feeling not enough. But
here's the thing:
it's scary.
What if you took the helmet off just for a second and allow them to fall into I am not enough and insecurity just for a season? Because without the experience of it, without that resistance, there's an ancient document called the Emerald Tablets. And in this Emerald Tablet, the writer, the author of the Emerald Tablets, it's probably about 30 to 40,000 years old. They've uncovered it in Egypt, but it says man stands or exists on that which resists him. Otherwise, man does not have a place to stand. So it's an ancient piece, but it's powerful because without resistance, there's no building of strength. They need to feel that. So when my son is doing his little emotional thing, I don't jump on him immediately. What I do is I give it time to express. And that's the key. The problem is in this society, we want to protect everybody from everything. And the buzzword is, well, stress kills. No, ignorance of stress kills. When you don't know how to deal with stress properly, it will injure you. Get up under a bar with 225 pounds on it on a bench and not having worked up to that level, not having mastered stress up to 225 pounds, you will find either your throat concaved or your chest recessed. Well, in order to avoid that, you want to pepper in these stresses and allow them to be vulnerable to these stresses long enough to say, hey, this didn't feel good, so that they actually are able to vocalize what they're feeling, so that there's an event there that they can actually point it to. When you take that away from them, you take away their ability to learn, and you've taken away growth, because growth only happens in resistance to something. You only know growth when it's on a flat plane, right? This is our flat plane here, and something moving in this direction, it needs something to stand on. And that standpoint is resistance. That's your launching pad.
I like that. Without resistance, there's no building of strength. I mean, definitely makes sense. Yeah. And I'm fine with letting my children fail and fall. You know, it's hard as a parent for sure. Yeah. Yeah. But I know from my own life that without failure, there is no progress. Like you have to go through some rough times in order to persevere. If it comes too easy, you just don't have what it takes to actually withstand the storm. Absolutely. So that's really important. And one of the things you mentioned as we kind of talk about our kiddos and failure, I have a 7-year-old boy as well.
Nice.
Yeah. So they are, they're challenging in their own right with just that energy level. But yeah, I love it though. You mentioned some of your failures and how it kind of led to where you are now. Do you mind sharing maybe one of your biggest or some of your failures?
My biggest failure was me against the world. That story, that was a failure story. And what that did was it drove me into this need to achieve and prove myself. But in the quest for acceptance, in the quest for appreciation, I allowed things around me to depreciate. So it was like, because I was acting out of an inferior mindset, I was behaving from an inferior place, then everything else started to become the inferior thing. It sort of created this like enemy basic concept. So I started trying to start businesses. And by doing so, I would be taking away time from the family, taking away time from my wife. I wasn't communicating well, like all the things. Like, I'm such an introvert. Like, I can sit in a hole all day and be completely fine. Like, I don't need to talk to people. I'm really good by myself. Don't bother me. Give me my books, right? And my encyclopedias and all of my stuff, my volumes of stuff that I can just kind of pour in and think about, and I'm good to go. And that to me is a failure point. It's a failure to connect. It's a failure to engage. You're not really engaging properly. And my wife would jump on my case when she felt like I wasn't giving her the engagement she was wanting in our relationship. So we had to make some hard pivots, and we have had some really intense conversations around that. And it caused a lot of anger in me during that time. So from the time of young child up until, my 30s, I really had a bout with anger that really started to really deteriorate everything around me, especially my relationship with my family, and just in general, just my quality of life in general started to really, really take a hit for the worst. And it wasn't until I was willing to face it head on and call it what it was, call it what it really was, and call the situations that sort of help foster that response to living really what they were, and not make anything else an enemy. Like, I stopped believing that I actually had any enemies at all.
Where do you think that came from? The anger, the you against the world, like, where do you think that stemmed from, it starting so young?
It was a mistrust thing. So when I was about 8 years old, I had a situation that happened where I had I'd say an illicit sexual interfacing with a family member. And that the need to keep that a secret, and then having these emotions unlocked in me prematurely, it made me feel like I was unworthy to be a part of anything. I had to be in the outskirts, and I had to shut up. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't talk about this. So it kind of created this secret inner space where I would keep everything close to the chest. I couldn't talk to anybody because no one would believe me. And that's what was told to me after the event happened. No one's going to believe you anyway. So It's like, well, damn, what do I do with this? I've got to go to the grave with this. And this fear of I'll never be able to get help from this. I'm talking 30 years, PTSD, night terrors. I'd wake up at least 5 nights out the week screaming at the top of my lungs at dark figures and all kinds of stuff. All this while I was thinking, okay, I got to fight. I got to fight. I got to fight. I got to fight. And then I just stopped fighting and started asking questions. And when I started asking questions, that's when change started happening. I was listening to a podcast, and a gentleman said, if your thou shalts outweigh your what ifs, your theological compass is all effed up. That changed everything for me. So I started asking questions, and the questions led to more answers, and the answers led to more questions. So the more inquisitive I was, the less meaning I gave to things, and the less meaning I gave to things, the more I allowed them to be in their space without them having to mean something for me to interface with it. I can be an objective creator and not a subjective one, and not fall into the trap of naive realism where I think I'm thinking objectively and I'm actually subjective. I need it to look a certain way. I don't need anything to look any way. I don't need coaching to be a certain way. I don't need personal training to look a certain way. I don't need public speaking to look a certain way. I don't need it to look a certain way anymore because I'm not inferior to anything. Right? We dress things up. We dress things up because we need it to look a certain way in order to make ourselves seem superior. But can you walk in an empty room and not furnish it and be in the room and be okay being present in the room empty?
Nathaniel, you went real deep. You went real deep. No, that is so good though, because so many times we feel like things have to look a certain way, right? Even in entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Entrepreneurship has to look a certain way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it doesn't,
It
right?
doesn't have to look a certain way.
I
It
love
gets
that.
to look a certain way, right? So have tos and get tos are different. Like I have this gratitude funnel. Have to, want to, get to. Get to is where you want to be at. That's the mastery level. Oh, yeah. I have to go to the post office today. No, no, no. You get to go to the post office today. That means now you're grateful for the opportunity that is afforded to you to move from one space to another. That's different. I'm appreciative of an empty room because the room is furnished with me. You're all the room actually it needs. The purpose of the furniture is to express how you feel in the room. But can you be in the space without the furniture there and never touch a thing, never move anything, never paint a wall, just be in there for a sec, just for the moment, just be in the space. Because if you concentrate on what's not there, then where are you not? You're not present.
I feel like you have given us all a challenge because no, seriously, I mean, this podcast is built for aspiring entrepreneurs, early stage business owners, side hustlers, and you've given us a challenge, right? To just be where we are.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean be stagnant though. You know, that's not what that means.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But to be enough. We are enough.
Yes. Being is it, like the artifact of that which is creation is being. Being is the artifact of creation. And everything else comes down from that. All the experiences come from being because being is a verb. When you learn language, you learn the be verb as an action verb. It's to be. It's I am, you are, they are, we were, they was. Whatever it is, it's all forms of being. Right? So like when you're in the present moment, we don't have language to describe this because we speak English and it's a very mutt language. It's parts and it's a mutt language. It's parts of this language and that. That's why we have Latin and Greek and some African stuff or whatever based on your culture and some Irish, like it's all different. It's like a melting pot. So it's a mutt language. Now, the problem is it's so watered down with tonality and watered down with grammar that you're trying to be so proper in our explanations that we're unable to articulate guttural things. Beingness is breathing. Being in the space and just breathing, that's being. Beingness is living. The word living means to digest. It's actually an ancient Hebrew term, which is the word chai. It's a very guttural word, but it's the picture of the stomach. When you do a word study on it, it's agricultural and biological. In this case, it's biological. So the same word for life is the same ancient Hebrew word in Paleo Hebrew for the stomach and its process of digesting food, breaking it down into its smallest parts so your blood can receive it. So now when you're being in the present moment, when you're in the moment, beingness is how you're filtering life. So life is not happening to you, it's happening from you and for you. So you're the seed telling the soil what you need, and the soil is now providing for you the necessary environment for you to be the best that you can ever be.
I love it. I recently heard a quote that said, everything starts from a seed. And I was like, whoa, so true.
Yeah.
Even us.
Even us.
Even us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Seeds. If you can understand agriculture, you basically can understand the most complex algorithmic detail of our entire universe, because everything in nature is, in fact, a microcosm of the macrocosm. You put a seed in the ground, the seed dies for a season only to be broken open. You break it open, it's not split open and dead. It's split open for the purpose of establishing roots. The seed stays in the dark, in a dark place, in an empty place, long enough to establish a proper root system. And then when it taps in the way it should, and guess what? Establishing roots is a byproduct of stress. If you water a plant too much, something happens. The plant doesn't grow roots deep enough to find the water deep within the soil. So it will require a bottle-fed mechanism, right? You have to pacify it. Well, the plant needs water, and you keep watering it, and the plant will keep being there. Oh yeah, she's going to water. There's no stress on my part. But when you stop watering the plant just for a season, and the plant starts to dig a little bit deeper. Like, okay, we can't find water here on the surface, so let's go deeper here. Stress causes you to go deep. That's where the seed comes into play. The seed is in its primary condition to handle stress. The shell is hard. The soft inner parts are protected. Not until it's put in the right environment does that thing begin to crack open and germination takes place.
Yes. Just yes. That's all I can say to that. One of the things as an entrepreneur, or just as a human being, period, do you think the being part of us just being, is our biggest limitation?
I think it is, because society has made it so that stress is not embraced. It's not handled well. Again, the narrative is stress kills, when that's not true. The ancient scripture says what? My people perish for the lack of what? Knowledge, not for stress. Stress isn't the problem. Your problem is ignorance. You don't know the ledge. You don't understand how to navigate the hard places. So because you don't understand that, you perish, you fall away, you fall into whatever addictions or whatever that thing is. These are just forms of death from not being able to address pain properly and handle responsibility as necessary as possible. So yeah, that is a thing in our society, because we trophy busyness, right? We hand out awards for multitasking, when that's the biggest misnomer of all. You're actually only ever doing one thing at one time. And when you try to multitask, you find yourself being more unproductive, because there's a bunch of stuff you missed because you were being incomplete. Again, you create a pain response, and now it's showing you've been irresponsible with your tasking. So yeah, that whole thing about having to do all this stuff, we've been stuck in do mode way too long. It's time for us to shift. I'm saying shift back and forward into being. Whoever we are to become, we must embody that in the moment, not then and back then or out at some time. We make the statement, well, someday. Oh, someday isn't a day in the week. Name the day and make it what it is. One day next week, or on a Wednesday at 12 p.m., this is going to happen. And even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. You've given a statement. You've made a statement of affirmation on how you're going to show up in the world. And you show up as if these things are, and watch how the world moves through you. Once you position yourself into being, you're no longer moving through time and space. Time and space is now moving through you. So things that you felt like you were moving towards are actually, you're shifting space. You're condensing.
Attracting.
Exactly. That's attraction. Attraction is a condensing of space between the thing where you are and where you want to be.
So let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Tell us, I don't know, maybe 3, maybe 5 steps, but what can we do today? What steps could we take today to get to that being?
Okay. So I have something called, you want to be an influencer of your reality, right? So I call it the influencer blueprint. And number 1 in this blueprint is study. You've got to do your research. And this studying requires us to be resourceful. You've got to be willing to talk to people that are older than you and know more than you are, and have more money than you, and they have more things and life looks better. You got to talk to people and be willing to be vulnerable and say, this makes me a little bit jealous. Study. I mean, like this is a part of the process. And then number 2, you got to understand, you got to comprehend. All right. Submit to that information that you just acquired, and be willing to shelve your old paradigms just for a season. You can pick them up later if they're still productive, but shelve them for a season so that you can test the profitability of the new paradigm. That's what understanding does. And then apply. Put the stuff you studied and understood into application, into practice, because what you believe is directly correlated to what you put into practice. Your behaviors and your belief systems are the same. As a matter of fact, Hebrews 11 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Preachers preach that all the time. And then says, because of this, the elect have a good report. That's the verse 2. Nobody talks about verse 2, but it's a good report when you are behaving in what you believe. Well, when you break the words down, it simply means that what you believe, the word faith is the word amen. So whatever you say amen to, your agreement, that's your belief system. The word evidence of things unseen, that word is pragma in the Greek. It's pragmatism. It's thought. It's action. It's behavior. It's what you put into practice by habits. So whatever you're habitual with, that's your belief system. So apply it in a way that challenges your belief system. Number 4, speak. Say something. Talk. Initiate meaningful conversations around the things that you're studying. right? So that you can have a sounding board to bounce this stuff off of, so that you're always engaging in proper communication. That's a big thing. Open your mouth, be intentional, and complete your sentences. I always tell my son, we were doing some mathematical problems. We're doing just teaching them how things work. I said, look, math is a language. And your job when you have an equation that's not solved is, in order to solve the problem, what you're actually doing is completing a sentence. So the answer to every problem is a complete sentence, whatever that sentence is, whether it's punctuated with colons or a question mark or a period, it still needs to be said completely. So open your mouth and say what needs to be said so that you can use the application of what you've understood based on what you've studied. Number 5, reflect. That's a time when you sit back and sort of get some hindsight perspective, because I think it was John Maxwell that says reflection turns hindsight into insight. So you take whatever you've understood, take whatever you've studied and understood and applied and spoke, and based on those behaviors, whatever you've done in that day, take a moment, step back and say, how can I have shown up better? Ask those hard questions. Reflection is the time for questioning. That's the time for you to ask yourself hard questions and not answer them quickly, but answer them truthfully, which means you may have to take a pause. You may have to ask the question and take a day and just let it sit for a while, because we talk too much, right? We talk too much in the moment because we feel like we need to fill every space with words. We don't. Reflection gives space for real breathing. That's the space to really be. And number 6, become. It simply means to embody and be the model of the change you wish to see in the world. This is the influencer blueprint. What you are doing is you're making an imprint on reality, and reality is actually mirroring back to you what you're imprinting. The idea of creating a world and reality you want to live means, the word creation is the word bara. It's 2 words in the ancient Sumerian text, and it literally means to take out of or extract out of and impress into clay. So you take a thought out of the ethereal field or the alternative space or the matrix or whatever you want to call it, right? Out of the mind, you take a thought, you extract the thought based on frequency and tonality and where you're attuned to, and you bring that thought in and you start putting into practice. Well, you start to become what you think. And Earl Nightingale says you become what you think about most of the time. So whatever that dominant thought is, whatever you've extracted, you will imprint that on your external world. And the world will mirror back to you, hey, this is what you've been thinking, so this is what we will give you. So when you study, when you understand, when you apply, when you speak, when you reflect, and then when you become, whatever that influence is, that's the byproduct of this process. So you can shift your intentions however you want, and then you can be polarized to the negative or the positive. Either way it goes, you're always making an influence. So why not do it consciously versus allowing your subconscious fears to control how you influence the world you live in?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is so good. I'm almost speechless. And I normally am one that talks a lot, Nathaniel, but no, that is so, so good. I mean, just those 6 steps really makes me think how different the world could be if we all embrace that. Poverty wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
I love it.
It breeds responsibility. It makes you responsible for what you're experiencing, no matter what. No one's coming to bail you out, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but no one's coming to save you from yourself. That's on you. That's on you. Whatever you're experiencing, you created it. And it's up to you. Either you want to tell a different story or you live in the stories you've already been telling. But you get to decide what the reward factor is. So what's the risk that you're taking in telling this old story, that the reward that you want isn't on the table because you've taken the risk and you just foregone everything you could have had in the world because the old story felt easier. It was safer for you to stay here. What if you told a different story? You picked up the pen and you authored a different chapter, said, okay, I'm gonna put a period at that chapter. We're gonna put a page here that's blank, and then we're gonna start chapter 2. And let's start writing again with a new story that you want to get a reward from. Ask yourselves this question. Is the story I'm telling myself right now the one I want to reward me?
Okay, I know our conversation is supposed to end in a few minutes here, but I have so many thoughts and questions around that, though, because let's say you are growing up in an environment that is not the best. You haven't been exposed to even an opportunity or to have the knowledge of better or, how do you break that cycle? For my life, I feel like I had like this little, honestly, seed planted in me that's a bit different, but it was like a combination of like the steadfastness and hardworking of my grandmother, the go-getterness of my dad, who he was a go-getter, but in a not so positive direction.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I feel like I got kind of all of those positive elements from these people that I actually was able to produce a positive outcome from that. But what do you tell someone who hasn't had that seed planted or seeds planted?
What I tell them is ask better questions. So the answer to every problem is a complete statement, especially in the form of a question. So when you're trying to solve 2 + 2 = 4 or 2 + blank = 4, what you're asking is, what +2 gives me 4? So form a question. I have 3 questions that I ask any person that has a one-on-one with me. And I'm going to give you all these 3 questions. Number 1 question is, what do you want? That's a hard question for people to answer, mostly because most of the time I get the answer. The answer to the question I get is what someone else told them to want, what their parents told, what their grandmother told them to want, or what their uncles showed them they should want. What do you believe? What are your belief systems? Again, I just laid out for you that what you believe is going to be what you practice. So get an idea of what you're doing every day, and then I can tell you exactly what you believe. You can tell whether someone believes they are or are not enough based on the intention and the fervency of which they are working towards their goals. If they're working towards their goals because they're afraid they're out of time, they're not going to have enough time to get there, then they're operating out of a fear base. And that belief system is going to tear things apart. So what do you want? What do you believe? And then the last question is the hardest one. What are your choices? Knowing you have options on the table is everything. There is no one lifeline, ladies and gentlemen. Every 1/1000th of a second, you are changing trajectories based on your thought. Every 1/100000th. This is peer-reviewed science. So that means that not even at the blink of an eye, at the time it takes light to refract off the retina is how quickly it takes for one to shift their lifeline. That's how quickly it happens. And you get to decide, because decisions are based on choices. To decide means to take away one thing from another. But what you're deciding on is the fact that there are choices on the table, not what your mama told you, not what your grandmother told you, not what your pastor told you. I'm sorry. I know some of y'all love y'all pastors, but they're not the end all be all, and they're flawed just like the rest of us. And they're misinterpreting things just like the rest of the people that are teaching things. And we all have this tendency to want to be the go-to person, but we've all got our stuff. However, understanding that means that there's as long as there's a flaw, there's a choice. As long as there's a flaw, there's a choice to be made. That means there's something else that transcends the flaw toward flawlessness. You're moving towards that direction. So what do you want? What do you believe? What are your choices? When you ask those questions and give time to answer them, I always encourage people to ask questions. Don't make statements, ask questions, because statements start to build stories, right? Questions create this internal reflection, and reflection turns hindsight into insight. Now we're back at that whole reflect segment number 5 in our list. We're back at reflect.
Right.
So ask those questions. You have to. You can't assume that you know everything, because you don't know every damn thing.
Right.
And you ain't ever gonna know everything. And the people you're talking to ain't gonna. I don't know everything. No. I know what I know, but in the words of Socrates, I don't know what I don't know.
Don't know. Right.
And settle in that. When you settle in the place of ignorance and watch truth show up without hindering. Settle in the place of being ignorant and watch truth show up without hindering. As a matter of fact, the word truth actually means in the Greek to recognize where you're ignorant. That's actually what it means. It means literally be ignorant and be okay with it.
Be ignorant, be okay with it. But still go after knowledge, right? Because you're studying.
Exactly.
You're
You
studying.
still want to
Yeah.
do your part. You still want to going to show up in a certain way. You still want to study and understand and apply and etc. But you still have to. You're studying and doing all these things from a place of ignorance. You're doing it from
Mm-hmm.
that place.
Not going into it like you already know everything. Got it.
There you go. That's the key. And
Yeah.
what's the scripture? I think the Yeshua that says, you will know the truth. Because most people say, well, the truth will set you free. It's not what it says. The text says you will know the truth. And in knowing the truth will make you free. Well, the word, the break it down. I love words, and I break texts down the way that makes sense so I can understand what was being taught to the people that were receiving the message. And it literally says, when you break it down into the Greek, it says, you will know where you are ignorant, and where you are ignorant will make you free. You become who you are because you're willing to be made ignorant. Because truth is the thing in the room that everybody's trying to describe, but can never get it right. So you're always going to be trying to get to the truth. The idea is when you come out of these places, these environments that we grew up in that were hard, you got to know that that actually wasn't the truth. That was an interpretation of truth in the room. And as erroneous as it was necessary for growth. And that's the embracing. I get to experience the hard things in life for the sake of recognizing that I am so ignorant. There's so much more for me to learn and so much more for me to become, that I'm willing to decide to be ignorant in this moment so that I have now access to everything. Now I'm more resourceful. You're more resourceful when you're empty.
Yeah.
You can understand a whole lot when you don't know anything, when you're willing, right? You can apply plenty when you don't have a bunch of stuff in your pocket. You can apply yourself well when you're not weighed down with a bunch of stuff, right? You can speak well when you don't have everybody else's words in your head, right? I mean, I'm just going down the list, and this is just the same list. You can reflect without everybody else's thoughts in your mind. You're now objective. You can become because you're not trying to be everyone else.
Right.
That's surrender. When you empty yourself and surrendering to the journey, truly embracing the journey of life, my gosh, who could you truly become, and how can you really show up? The way you will execute life will be damn near divine.
Yeah. Asking questions. That's one thing I admire about my husband. Whenever he's talking to the kids about something, he always asks them questions.
That's important.
Yeah. I'm not as good at that. I'm usually more of the do it because I said so, or, I'm more of the statements person, but I admire the fact that he asks questions and then they actually answer.
Yeah.
And that opens up to a whole nother level of conversation.
It does. And unbeknownst to us as parents, we actually build a different level of trust with the child when you allow them to answer questions, because you empower them to make a decision for themselves. And it's okay to give a directive from time to time, because you need to be able to balance that. Like, okay, I need this picked up and I need it picked up now. Don't ask me any questions.
Right.
I don't allow questions for things we've already had conversations about. All right. So if we have a set rule, we have a set of standards. Once the standard is in place, we expect everybody to operate along those standards. When one decides they don't want to operate on those standards, then we start addressing that. But if there's just a legitimate, well, how come? Then assess it. Maybe it's not them talking back. Maybe they're just really not understanding. And our job is to help them understand the why, the logos of the thing. This is the divine why. Why is it that this happens? Well, buddy, here's why. I know this is frustrating, but this is why we do this, right? Or like we were out of town visiting my sister and my family. She had a baby shower over the weekend, and my son, he's playing with the cousins, so he doesn't want to leave, and I got to get everybody home and everything. And I'm okay with you not wanting to leave. What I'm not okay with is when you go against the standard and you start changing your attitude to be disrespectful. And only way I'm going to get home is if I drive myself, correct? Yes. So if we're going to have a good relationship in this moment, I need you to do two things. First of all, I need you to address your attitude, because I'm not okay with it. See, I'm addressing the thing that disrespects the standard. Then there's a question. Now I'm asking questions and he's answering those questions. So now it's like, okay, he's in the power seat. When you can answer the questions, you're in the power seat. And I want him to feel empowered in that regard so that he's not always feeling inferior to his parents, but he feels like he has space to speak.
Right. Yeah. I agree. Sometimes I feel like mine has too much space to speak.
I know
but it's like, it's just different. It's different than when I grew up. And I think there's a good place for it, but there's also sometimes where I just want to take the approach of my grandmother and be like, I'm not arguing with a child, so.
Yeah. And then even what you just said, Monica, is like the approach you're taking is not even yours. It belongs to somebody else.
Yeah,
it's someone else's story. Right. It's someone else's story. It's someone else's tools, right? Mm-hmm. You're using someone else's resource for how they engage life. And now you're engaging, you're replicating the same environment because that was the only tool you had. But what if for a moment you got more resourceful and asked yourself, okay, so how can I do this differently? And then when you ask those questions, be willing to be handed or led to a resource that gives you a different outcome. Even your podcast.
I'm going to start asking that question for everything. How can I do this differently? Seriously.
Yeah. We all ought to.
Yes. And you were about to say, and even for the podcast, what were you about to say?
I was just saying, like, even your podcast is a resource, not just for the listening collective, but for you. Because these people are, the individuals that are showing up. They're not just talking to your audience. They're talking to Monica, the podcast host. You're asking the questions and they're talking to you as well as everyone else. So like you now have a resource pool that you can pull from that you can make your own. And it doesn't have to be just your grandmother's. It doesn't just have to be your mom's or your dad's or whatever that family relative that was the most influential on you, that did the most of the impression in you. It can be that, okay, this was good for a season, but now I am choosing to create a new tradition in how I show up in the world. I am now not the byproduct or just an artifact of Monica's grandmother. I am Monica in tandem with Monica's grandmother, so that the two of you through ancestral DNA connection are working together, not separate. This belonged to my grandmother, puts her out here, and then you're here and you're taking from to give. But if grandma is in you and you, grandma, and everybody else who's your ancestry is asking those, because you're not just asking that question individually. Every individual that's responsible for the DNA that's running in your body is asking that question with you when you say, how can I show up differently in this moment? All of the eyes for thousands of generations are in the room with that question. So how do I show up, all of you, the entire entourage of Monica? Monica is not just one person. Monica's the entourage of her ancestry. Monica's the entourage of creative energy. Monica's the entourage of every life experience she's had. So how do you show up through the entourage effect and bring that to the table? Watch how resourceful you'll be.
Yeah, because I tell you, my grandmother was about 5 feet, but she was a powerhouse. Like no plane at all. But no, I love that. And it's funny. My husband and I were just talking about that last night a little bit. And I was talking about DNA and how things from hundreds of years ago are still impacting us today because through our DNA. Yeah. So we were just talking about that last night. But Nathaniel, this has been a great conversation. And you're right. I love podcast hosting because I get such an opportunity to meet wonderful people such as yourself and learn. Honestly, I ask questions I want answers to.
Absolutely.
So I mean, definitely, I want the audience to have the answers to it as well. But I ask those questions that I am very curious about. So when I get to know people, there are questions that I have for them all the time.
Absolutely.
So
it's beautiful.
I know that you're making a great impact through this functional life and wellness. And I wish you much success with that. Just my last question. So how's business going? I know 2020 was kind of interesting for all of us, but how's it going for you?
It's going pretty good. I took a step back and I still do some of I do plenty of one-on-ones. Well, I'm saying plenty, but plenty that I can handle as far as time span. I'm doing homeschooling and stuff. So because of that, the way things have happened, I have multiple businesses that I'm involved in. I'm an IT specialist that I started a business doing IT work. I also do commercial and radio voiceovers. So I have that as a part of a leg of my business as well. And then, but with the coaching stuff, I took a step back only so that I can really assess Nathaniel and make sure that I was showing up as Nathaniel and not as a byproduct of someone else. While it didn't profit me financially as much as I would have liked it to, it did profit me in character. And character is much more important for me anyway, because it helps me show up better. So business, it's been fun, actually. I have been having some really good conversation with my coach, and it's been challenging because it's challenging me to kind of have conversations, get on Clubhouse and do things that I normally wouldn't do, like podcasting and all this stuff. This is all work for me. All right. This is work for me. Me showing up this way is work. When I get off this call, I'm going to go in a hole somewhere so I can regroup and then come back to society. That's just the way introverts work. We give everything we can in the moment because it takes a lot for us to show up in that way. But then when it's time to refill, we find a secluded place and we just kind of refill ourselves in that way. But business has actually been fun, because I've been able to practice more. I've been able to really hone my mindset down and to distill it in a way that I can give people formulas. So I've been able to do more teaching, more online things, more virtual things, more podcasting. So it's been a lot of fun, a lot of learning, new resources, new approaches. And I couldn't have asked for a better gift than COVID. COVID was a gift to me because it settled Nathaniel into the root system that he is.
Yeah. It's been a gift for me as well, in a lot of ways, for sure. It made me slow my roll, for one thing.
There you go. Pull
slow
it back.
Down. Yeah, pull it back, figure out priorities. And,
Absolutely.
That's been very good. So you're actually a lot like my husband in that he will give his all in front of people, talking to people, lots of energy, but then he does need that moment to go and replenish. He's like that as well.
Exactly.
I can relate to you.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, just real quick. What's the name you have a podcast, right?
I do have a podcast. It's called Inspire Beyond. You can look it up on Apple and on Spotify. Inspire, you can spell the word out, or you can put the little periods to make it an acronym, but it's an acronym for Initiating Noble Solutions that produce innovative results through engagement. So it's sort of a way of bringing people into a space and having being a resource for people to go to. So I've got about 5 episodes up right now on Spotify and on Apple Podcast. I think you all will enjoy them. I actually went back and listened to them the other day just to kind of get a feel for it. And it's really good stuff. And I'm learning from myself because I'm speaking. I put myself in these states when I'm talking and I'm going really deep. So I'm talking slower, so that you all are understanding exactly what I'm saying. So it's not about getting a bunch of stuff out, but getting what needs to be said in the room, just enough to cause you to ask more questions.
Love it. All right. Well, we will check out your podcast, and I will also include all of your other contact information in the show notes. Yes, Nathaniel, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Monica. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great anticipation for this conversation. And it feels like it did exactly what it was meant to do.
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to thank Nathaniel for being a part of the Become Your Own Boss podcast. All of his contact information is in the show notes. Thank you for listening today. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Become Your Own Boss Podcast. If you have comments or questions, you can email me at monica@monicaallen.com. Take a moment, if you haven't already, to share and subscribe to the podcast. I would also appreciate it if you would take a quick minute to leave a review. Now is the time to level up, leave a legacy, and become your own boss.